And we have Witold Rodkiewicz from the Center for Eastern Studies joining us this morning. Good morning, sir. Delighted to have you with us.
Good morning. It's always a delight to be in your program.
So let me start with a somewhat holistic picture. What was Vladimir Putin trying to accomplish aside from showing that he still has friends, in Asia at least?
Well, these visits were in fact very different, although the PR around them and the atmosphere and the pictures were very similar. And they were supposed to, as you mentioned, they were supposed to create this impression that Vladimir Putin is a respected world leader who has friends and so on and so on. But the visit to North Korea was about strengthening the relationship and sort of formalizing the de facto alliance that emerged during Russia's aggression against Ukraine. We know that North Korea has been helping Russia with military equipment, with ammunition, and so on and so on. And this is clearly the signing of the treaty is a kind of payback for this help, and also North Korea quite openly supported and supports Russia in its aggression and its policy in Ukraine. So also this is also a part of Putin's attempt to strengthen, to scare the US and the West away from supporting Ukraine, because this is connected with his threat that he uttered some time ago, a couple of weeks ago, in Tashkent about providing the enemies of America and the West with sophisticated missiles and sophisticated weapons equipment that could be directed and used against American and Western bases all over the world. So this is kind of getting one step closer to the fulfillment of this threat. And this is in response to Western equipment being used by Ukrainians in defense of their homeland, especially this recent loosening of conditions in the sense that the equipment can be used in a limited way to attack targets within the territory of the Russian Federation, all territory of the Russian Federation. So this is all about scare tactics and so on and so on. Vietnam was very different. Vietnam is an old partner of Russia. The ties go back all the way to basically the post Second World War situation, when the Soviets helping the Communist Party of Vietnam to fight against the French, the British, the French, the U.S., the South Vietnamese, then against the Chinese. So the elites, the Russian post-Soviet elite and Vietnamese communist elite have sort of a long tradition of cooperation and supporting each other. But the situation is completely new now. For Vietnam, the biggest threat is China, which, as we know, is the best closest ally, de facto ally of Russia. So Vietnam has been diversifying its foreign policy and security policy in the last years. And if you look at the numbers of trade, the Russian trade with countries like Turkey and those countries basically that, especially China, that did not join Western sanctions, have increased very significantly during the war against Ukraine during the last 2 years. Whereas the trade with Vietnam in 2022 basically collapsed from $7 billion to $5 billion. And Putin, it was very interesting because Putin could not resist his frustration when he was meeting Vietnamese graduates of Soviet and Russian schools, and he kind of vented his resentment at the fact that there are complications and difficulties with payments in trade between the two countries. This is because Vietnam is very careful about, it doesn't want to violate U.S. sanctions. And for example, also Putin also revealed that Vietnam doesn't want to service the Western aircraft that are used illegally by the Russian airlines, which were basically stolen by the Russian airlines from the lease from the. So this trip was about this was an attempt to persuade Vietnam to become more cooperative and stop being obstructive. This is also significant, yeah. And I think this is not really successful. He was not very successful, as his frustration and his resentment and his de facto accusations that the Vietnamese lacked political will to set up a working, effective system of mutual payments demonstrated.
Right, and sort of how was his trip received in China? Because I actually wanted to talk about Vietnam and what you mentioned, right? Because Vladimir Putin is trying, I believe, to balance, right, his relationships with Vietnam and China, and we have the issue of the South China Sea and the exclusive economic zone where Russia is extracting oil and gas. So, what was the Chinese response to his piece in this Vietnamese newspaper, right, where he said that Russia has a similar assessment of the situation in the Asia-Pacific region, similar to the Vietnamese one, not to the Chinese one?
Well, this is I think the quote that you mentioned is actually about something else. This is about the assessment, because on paper, in terms of rhetoric, Vietnamese signed up to all the Russian standard lines on international affairs, condemning de facto the U.S. for building so-called closed military blocks in Asia, and basically being guilty of raising tensions in Asia Pacific. So I think this particular statement referred to this, and actually this meant that Vietnam is aligning itself with Russian and Chinese position against the U.S. But I think this is purely rhetoric. There were other parts of the statements in which Russia maintained its position, its traditional position of kind of neutrality and attachment to principles of the international law of the seas, sort of confirming, sticking with Vietnamese position, supporting Vietnamese position on the South China Sea. In that sense, there is no change. But I think this is really pretty much ritualistic, and the fact that the Vietnamese are increasingly turning to the U.S., India, and other countries in terms of their security, and very telling is that Vietnam practically stopped buying weapons from Russia during since basically 2018. There's been a very significant sharp drop in purchases of Russian equipment.
But what is the Chinese take on that? I'm sorry if the quote was misused.
The Chinese take. I think I haven't. This was yesterday. I haven't. Sometimes Chinese reaction is delayed. I wasn't able to observe that, but what was striking was very restrained reaction of the Chinese to the signing of the military assistance treaty with North Korea, because North Korea has a similar treaty with China, and the Chinese were there. Basically, they didn't comment much. They were very restrained. Their comments were very laconic. They were approving, but very sort of cautiously approving. There was no enthusiasm. I think the problem there was that from the Chinese point of view, what Putin did was to encourage the North Korean leadership to become more assertive and more provocative towards the Americans in the Korean Peninsula and towards South Korea. And this increases the risk of a huge conflagration in Northeast Asia, in Korean Peninsula, and this is something that the Chinese are at the moment not welcoming. So that's why I think there was certain caution and lack of enthusiasm, lack of sort of fulsome praise on the Chinese part. Rather, they were saying, yes, we understand, this is their business. The Chinese has arrangement that the Chinese call back to back, meaning we never do anything against each other, but we conduct our policies independently. So each of us is fighting their own war against the West and the US. But everyone is waving their fists in their own manner, as to speak. So I think this is where the interests of both sides, that is China and Russia, do not coincide fully. There is certain tension, but I think this is not going to hurt the alliance because they have their eyes on the important thing, which is to them the challenge that the US and the West poses to their regimes, not by what they do, but what they are, because this is ultimately their alliance, their de facto alliance is about regime security and trying to create a world that is safe for the type of dictatorships that exist in North Korea, China, and Russia.
Witold Rodkiewicz, thank you very much. Sir, I wish we had more time to discuss the Korean situation, but I hope I will get to do that next time. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you. You too.